Colon cancer doesn't start with pain. It starts with small, subtle changes that most people ignore. And while colon cancer is still most common in older adults, it is now rising fastest in people between 20 and 50. And it's not because genetics suddenly changed, but because lifestyle and gut health have changed dramatically in a single generation. The good news, though, is that your body gives you early warning signs if you know what to look for. Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about 10 early signs of colon cancer that you do not want to ignore. And the first one is anemia. And what does that have to do with it? Well, anemia is a weak blood. It's when you have lack of oxygen carrying capacity. And we're talking about iron deficiency anemia specifically because that's where you're losing iron, so you can't make enough red blood cells to keep up. And now you don't have the oxygen carrying capacity there. And if anemia is related to a colon cancer, it's because it can cause a slow bleeding. And this slow bleed could be anywhere in the digestive tract, in the gastrointestinal tract. However, if it's high up, if it's in the upper GI, if it's in the stomach or duodenum, then it's usually going to be a faster blood loss, and it's going to be very symptomatic in the upper GI tract. And if it's a faster blood loss, then you're going to bleed more blood, and this blood is going to turn black, because it's red when it bleeds, but then it coagulates and it breaks down and it turns black. And this results in what they call a tarry stool. On the other hand, if this bleed is happening in the colon, then it's usually going to be a slower bleed, and it's going to be what's called occult. It's a occult blood loss because you're not really knowing about it. It's hidden. And what happens is it bleeds very slowly, and it's not enough that it changes the color dramatically, so therefore a lot of people miss it. So you could actually have a microscopic bleed for years before you know anything else. And the reason that these colon cancers give rise to these subtle bleeds is that tumors, the cancer tumors, they create their own network of blood vessels. And it's called angiogenesis. They develop their own blood vessels, and these blood vessels are often very fragile. So it doesn't take a whole lot for them to start bleeding. Sign number 2 is persistent fatigue. And one of the things obviously that can cause that is what we just talked about, anemia, but also inflammation, which often is associated with cancer, can also cause fatigue. And the tumor cytokines. So tumors are living tissue. They are your own cells, even if they are abnormal cells and they're misbehaving. So they're going to have a chemistry of their own. They're going to have chemical messengers that they give off called cytokines that can actually interfere with the action of your mitochondria who make energy for you. But very often this type of fatigue is dismissed as just stress or a normal part of aging. Sign number 3 is a subtle change in color, and it would typically be a darker stool. And this is because if there's a small amount of occult blood, the hidden blood that we talked about, then it could be originating higher up in the colon. If you see actual red, then it's probably very close to the opening. But if it's happening a little bit higher up in the colon, then it's going to have the opportunity to turn dark before it reaches the opening. And now it could be mixing or blending with the normal stool. And then it just turns a little bit darker, and it's not really perceptible to the eye. So that's when you would have to get a test of some sort, like a stool test, that can find what the eye misses, because they can detect this occult blood even if it's not visible to the naked eye. And this bleeding can also be intermittent. That means that these tumors with their own blood vessels, they are fragile, but if you have a very smooth bowel movement, it may not get irritated enough to bleed. Whereas as soon as you get a little constipated and it gets a little rougher, now they could start bleeding again. Sign number 4 would be changes in your bowel habits. And this is because tumors can alter the signaling of your enteric nervous system. And what's that? Well, you have a bunch of brain cells in your brain. They're called neurons, but you also have neurons in other areas of your body. And most of the other ones are actually in your gut. And that's called the enteric nervous system. And it regulates muscle contractions and blood flow and digestive enzymes and all that stuff. And a tumor could alter that either with pressure or with inflammation or with its chemical messengers. And if it alters it, it could affect the peristalsis. It could affect the muscular movement of food through your intestines. And it could also cause inflammation. And with inflammation, it could change the behavior of water, how much water is absorbed or released into the intestine. And now, if you have more water, it could get very soft, or if you have less water released, it could get very hard. So it could swing either way based on that inflammation. Now, the reason that this is something that we really want to pay attention to and understand is that colon cancer is the 3rd most common cancer in both men and women, and it's rising. So there's 150,000 new cases and 50,000 deaths in the United States every year right now. But what's most disturbing is that in the age group of 20 to 50-year-olds, it's rising the fastest. It's rising 1 to 2% every year for the last 20 years. And the reason is that your intestines is a very delicate, very critical environment. And worldwide, we're seeing a reduction in microbiome diversity. People have fewer and fewer species of bacteria in their gut, which very much affects their gut health. We have increased uses of antibiotics. We see more consumption and prevalence of processed foods all around the world. We see a decrease in movement, more sedentary lifestyle. People don't go outside. They spend more times on their phones and their computers and in front of the TV. And at the same time, we see an increase in chronic stress. Also, we see a dramatic increase all around the world in the metabolic diseases and the associated inflammation. So these are the things that are responsible for our gut health and in turn for the rise in colon cancer. Because these factors are increasing very, very quickly all around the world. These numbers that I'm showing you for the US, they're not an isolated phenomenon. This is everywhere. Sign number 5 is gas, bloating, or the sensation of early satiety. You get full earlier. And what's happening here is that we could have partial obstructions. If you have a tumor grow, it can interfere into the lumen, into the opening inside your intestines, and that can trap gas, and it can cause the sensation of pain and gas and bloating. And now food or intestinal contents have to be rerouted. They have to work their way around things. We could have a slowed transit, and when things move slower, we see increased fermentation, which is not good. And that means that we get more and more of these pathogenic species, and we have more gas formation. And as a result of all this, you could also experience earlier fullness, that you just eat a little bit, but your digestive tract is not really in good enough shape to process the food, so it sends you the signal that you're already full. Sign number 6 is tenesmus, and this is when you have an urge to go, very often painful, very urgent sensation that you have to go to the bathroom, but there is no result. Or even if there's a little bit of result, then you have the sensation of incomplete evacuation. It feels like you didn't finish the job, and very soon thereafter, you feel like you have to go again. And this is a very common early sign of what's called a rectal or a sigmoid tumor. So basically the way that your large intestine looks, it has some different compartments to it. So we have first the ascending colon, then we have the transverse colon, then we have the descending colon, and the sigmoid colon. So this is quite far. This is like 3 to 4 feet away from the exit. And then when it gets really close to the exit, here would be the sigmoid colon, and right here toward the end is the rectum. So these two areas is where we have the stretch receptors that gives us the signal that it's time to go. So if we get a stretch, if we have what's called a space-occupying lesion, a tumor that takes up space, then that can create a stretching sensation in that area. And when those receptors get stimulated or stretched, now normally that would be your fecal matter doing the stretching, but if you have a space-occupying lesion, a tumor doing the stretching, now you get the sensation even if you don't really have to go. And like we said, even if you go a little bit, it still feels like you have to go even after that. Sign number 7 is stool narrowing. And this would be where you have consistent pencil-thin stool. So if that happens once in a blue moon, we probably all experience that. If the stool get really soft, it could come out really thin. However, if it's consistent, if it's always like that, that's not a good thing. And again, it's some sort of growth, some space-occupying lesion that blocks the passage. So the only way for the stool to get past is to change shape. And if you're really constipated, then this may not work at all, and there could be some bigger problem. But what the body often does is it would add some water. If the only way to get it out is to make it softer, then the body could add some water and allow it to pass. But a lot of people who see this and later get a diagnosis of cancer, they will state that there were months of this pencil-thin stool before there was any pain or blood. Sign number 8 is a change in bowel habits that is more pronounced, more severe than what we talked about a little bit before. And it could be that we have an obstruction that causes constipation. If the obstruction is more severe and the stool can't move along, then it could cause constipation, and it would cause irritation to the inside of the bowel. And what the bowel would do now in defense was to release water. If we release the water, now the stool gets softer and we can flush it out. So very often what you would see with this would be alternating diarrhea and constipation. And now, of course, it's very important to understand that there's a lot of different things that can cause similar symptoms. So this is why we need to understand a little bit more about these mechanisms so that we can start putting it together. So this sign could be a hallmark, something very typical for an obstructive lesion, but it could also be something much less severe like IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, or IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, which in themselves, they are definitely something that you want to address, but it's not as serious as a cancer. Sign number 9 would be visible blood in the toilet or on toilet paper when you wipe. And this could be a more severe case of cancer, and or it could simply be that the lesion is closer to the anus, closer to the exit. As we said before, if the bleed is very close to the exit, now it's not going to have time to turn black or coagulate or break down. And then it's going to show up red in the toilet. Or it could be a more severe case that just bleeds a lot more, so it moves out quickly. So if it's a heavier bleed or it's very close to the anus, then this blood could even show up bright red if it's just been released. Now, the thing to understand about tumors is that even though they are your own tissue, they are your own cells genetically, they have changed. They have gone rogue. Healthy tissue is very organized. It has different layers and a very structured organization, but cancer cells don't have that. And because they're not healthy and they're not organized, this disorganization makes them fragile. And that's where they can start bleeding very early, very easily. However, when they're large and they have been more generations of cells within that tissue, now as the tumor progresses, it becomes more and more disorganized very often. And the more severe cancers, they are more disorganized, so that the more disorganized they are, the more fragile they are, and the more they tend to break, and the more they tend to just sort of release tissue and slough off tissue so that it can spread in the wrong places. But in this case, what it means is that as they get larger and more disorganized, is that they're much, much easier to start a bleed. And of course, by itself, we don't really know much if we see blood in the toilet or on toilet paper, because most of these are going to get confused with hemorrhoids, which is by far the most common reason for this. And sign number 10 is weight loss, especially if this weight loss is rapid and unexplained, meaning we're not on a diet, we're not fasting, we're not exercising a lot. There's just doesn't seem to be a reason. There's no effort in weight loss, and yet it's happening, and it's happening quickly. And there can be many reasons for this weight loss. And one is hormone disruption, because these tumors, they have their own chemistry and they can release chemical messengers that disturb your own chemical messengers and your hormones. And some of these hormones could signal for appetite, and you could have a dramatic reduction, a drop in appetite. So maybe you think you're eating, but you're not really eating very much. And some of these chemical messengers could be inflammatory cytokines, and that could cause an increase in muscle breakdown. They cause your own body tissues to break down, while at the same time, it causes them to not synthesize, to not make as much muscle tissue anymore. They can also cause what's called hypermetabolism, or a dramatic increase in your basal metabolic rate, which would cause the breakdown of muscle and fat. And on top of that, these tumors, especially as they grow larger, they will steal nutrients. The one sign of tumor is that they don't have a regulated growth rate. They grow as fast as they possibly can, and then of course, they're going to be stealing nutrients as they get a little bit bigger. And also, you have a GI dysfunction. Your GI tract is not working as well as a healthy one. So now you can't absorb nutrients and process and digest food the way that you usually should. So when you have all of that going on, it's usually not a good sign at all. It's a serious late warning sign. And very often it goes by the name of cachexia, which is an end stage syndrome where all of these things are going on and you have a severe loss of quality of life and your body is breaking down, and it's usually very difficult to turn that around at that point. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.